I want to touch on, it came up at a couple points, the price, just because that is a question I've heard from many folks. I know there are obviously some unknowns, and it depends partly on what you do with your top level domain, but Paul put out there a sort of a ballpark range when you roll up the application, and then also what it takes to set up the registry of about 300 to 500,000. Does that feel about right to the rest of you guys? As a range?
Annually.
Annually.
Well, I don't know. I think it depends a lot on the size of the TLD and the amount of activity in it. But I think certainly first year one, where you've got the $185,000 application fee, that's going to be a much bigger year for most .brand TLDs, I think, because I don't envision most .brands having 50,000, 100,000 names in it. So on an ongoing basis, I think you're looking at the ICANN expense certainly of 25,000, which is a fixed number. You've got 25 cents a name in addition to that for ICANN fees, and you're going to have operating fees. Well, let's say you hire a registry services provider, you're going to have external operating fees that'll probably be less than $100,000 a year, depending on the size of the TLD. And then you've got your internal cost of administration. So I think you can run the whole thing, on an annual basis for $250,000. And while that's a pretty big number in the context of a legal budget, in the marketing budget, particularly for the Fortune top 500, that's a pretty reasonable expense to have a global platform that you can expose your brand to.
And this is Carl. I think that's really important because, when you think about the marketing attention on sustained customer engagement, for not that much money, you can spend tens and hundreds of millions of dollars trying to advertise to achieve that. This is a whole nother platform, as you said, so I think that's a smart analysis.
Yeah, I would agree with that completely. And for digital marketers, just think about what your online advertising budget is. And it doesn't look so big anymore if you think about what the potential benefits would be.
And you again think of something like, I'm even thinking of text ads, a search, pay-per-click advertising, having that shorter, more concise, and simply fewer characters URL which you're pointing to people, and that's another place where it's just much more effective and better marketing.
I think if you think of the components of what, let's take the first year cost. Let's just think of the components. There is an application fee.
Right.
There may be some, if there are conflicts, or you find yourself having to go through an objection process, then there is some fees you have to pay for the evaluation or panel processes for that. There is the cost of the initial cost of a registry service function if you take that. Now that gets laid off then if you've got a revenue model behind this, of course, and this is also revenue generators. You must keep that in mind as well. And then there's the cost of the sort of things that I think Deloitte's gone through, the internal process of thinking through how do I want to position this as a brand. I include all of that in that first initial cost. And there are people who can help you, obviously, in writing applications, help you think through the brand stuff, where you can do it internally. Whichever way it goes, it's a cost. And then, as I think as Roy says, it does come down the next year once it's into place. I think the costs then are a function model.
Yeah, and we really evaluated different levels of the technology infrastructure and operational costs, and kind of came down to three approaches. One would be build it ourselves. The other would be completely outsource it. And then somewhere in the middle, a hybrid approach where part of it may be outsourced, part of it we may build ourselves. We may have some of the infrastructure already in place to handle some of these things. And each company is going to be different. There's certainly large technology organizations where part of this hosting stuff might not be a big deal at all. And then there's benefits to each of those approaches over time as well. So if you build it yourself, there's a lot of initial upfront costs and a lot of learning to do, and that might scare people off. But over time, it might actually end up being less expensive, and that may be 5 years out. But then again, that's a lot of risk to put up front. So I imagine most people will look for a partner to help them through.
Because the build or buy question comes up a lot, okay? And I mean, I personally have never seen a software project that got finished on time or on budget. So given the fact that this is pretty specialized technology, and there's a lot of learning that goes into, building an online registry system that doesn't jeopardize the security and stability of the internet. And the fact that if anything in the future, the cost of getting these services is likely to go down. I mean, of course, I do registry services, so it's my business to talk about it like this. But at the end of the day, I mean, logic just tells you that if these services are available at a reasonable cost today, which they are, and you can fire up one of these TLDs in an existing registry system without having to worry about any of the ICANN questions, because you know somebody's going to take care of all of that stuff. You eliminate all the risk related to the technical part of the application. Then you really can focus on what is your business plan, how is this actually going to address your strategy, how does this help your brand, the things that you're good at. You don't generate your own electricity because you're not good at that. Why would you build your own registry system when you can buy one or rent one for pretty cheap that will last a long time, that is likely to get cheaper over time? I just think it's while most big brand companies have excellent IT folks and excellent IT teams, not building some off-strategy thing that is not their core business, not their core competency.
I'll let Carl make a last comment on that topic, and then I'm going to put the first of the audience questions to the group. Go ahead, Carl.
I was just going to say, infrastructure costs, I think, could be quite significant if you're a company transitioning your .com to a .brand, and if you are a company that transacts with customers and accept some form of e-commerce. And so it's really not just the cost from the brand marketing angles, nor the cost of the registration, which is why, making sure that you've gone through the appropriate exercise with domain specialists, with the strategic thinkers that can really envision what's possible, makes sense, because we are talking really big numbers here.